Right, so today I wanted to talk about something interesting I seen from Reuters Science News saying um, China generated 53% of the world's total coal-fired power in 2020, 9 percentage points more than 5 years earlier, despite climate pledges in the building hundreds of renewable energy plants, a global data study showed on Monday. So um, this is something I wanted to bring up for many reasons that I don't even know where to begin, to be honest. But the first one being whenever you point this stuff out, um, most of the climate zealots, the climate alarmists, will come back at you with, oh no, China's building, they're putting in renewable stuff. Same goes for India, right? Um, which is true to an extent, but it's not true to the extent they think it is. But the other problem, too, is that as a whole, they're still increasing the amount of quote unquote non renewable, right? Because again, something that people should be aware of is the idea that wind and solar are renewable, at least in the way people think renewable is an oxymoron, right? Because if you look at a similar mining process needs to be done to gain the materials used in solar panels as the mining process for oil, right? Um, same solar panel, or sorry, wind is a little different, and that's number one, those things are going to have to be trucked in, which is obviously being used by diesel trucks, right? Number two, they're not recyclable, and number three, they only last like 10, 20 years. Same goes for solar panels, right? So they end up in landfills, right? So the idea that wind and solar are actually 100% renewable is an oxymoron. It's just not true. And this is the problem that I really can't stand about a lot of people. Maybe it's a lot of them are just ignorant, but it'd be nice if the people at the top would actually be honest and say, yeah, those, because people seem to have the idea that, oh, you put in solar and it'll last forever, or at the very least it'll last your lifetime. Same goes for wind power, right? But that's not the case, right? That's not how it works. And the other big lie that people seem to believe is that you can just store unlimited amounts of renewable energy, which isn't the case either. To power a house, you would need a bedroom full of batteries to do that. And again, if it's not sunny or windy, you're screwed, right? So those are just some of the myths. I mean, that there's an endless list of. I mean, the other one would be obviously like to power a solar house, you're going to need like 20 or 30 grand worth of solar panels. Again, what percentage of people can afford that? Again, there's a lot of, and not to mention too, like I say, it's only going to last like 20 years tops. So again, the problem with wind and with solar at the moment is that you lose money doing it basically. So, but again, there's a lot of other stuff. But the big point here is China, right? That if we were worried about climate change, again, I brought this up a lot before, but I don't think it could be stressed enough. If we were actually worried about climate change, almost the entirety of our focus would be on China and India. Again, Canada generates like 1% of the world's emissions, and we may I mean, again, I haven't actually seen this, but may already be carbon neutral, considering the amount of trees we have. In fact, we probably are. It's just the government probably doesn't want people to know that because it doesn't fit the narrative. Canada probably already is carbon neutral. Again, I don't know that for sure, but again, given the amount of trees we have, it probably is the case. Um, but again, if we were really like China and India, China, 53% of the world's coal power. When you include India, that number is probably like 70, 80%. I think China and India are like 2/3 of the world's emissions in two countries. Like, again, if the goal was climate change, then why are we not basically directing the majority of our focus to China and India? Like, if China and India reduce their emissions by like 1/1000th of a percent, it would be better than if Canada reduced ours by 1%. And we already know the carbon tax doesn't reduce emissions, right? The BC government's own numbers show that. So and this is the other thing too when it comes to climate change that we have to go over and over again as well, is that the government solution seems to be carbon tax. The problem with carbon tax is that the government's own numbers show it doesn't do anything. And even if it does do anything, you have to account for the fact that the amount of money that's being taxed from people. Like, I'm sorry, but taxing an extra $1,000 or $2,000 a year from the average person, it's not worth it for a 1% reduction in emissions. That's like, you know, dumping a beer into the ocean and, thinking that you're going to get drunk off the water. Like, no, like it's such a minuscule effect. It's nothing. Like, even if Canada reduced our emissions by 50%, that's still well below 1% of the world's emissions. Like, there's nothing we can do to change the world. And people say, oh, we got to be an example for the rest of the world. Well, how's that working out for us? We've been an example for the rest of the world for over, 5 years now? China and India are still increasing their output. If being an example was such a great idea, then I mean it's not doing anything. So again, like, none of the climate alarmist arguments make any sense. Like, they're so easy to debunk. It's not even funny. And this is the thing too, that the other big hiccup that people, well, a lot of times you end up with, is that you can think that climate change is a big issue, but still not want a carbon tax, and still not want to put hundreds of thousands of Canadians, mainly Albertans and Saskatchewans, or whatever Saskatchewans would be, out of work, right? There's other things we can do. Like, and this just proves just how ignorant and how much of a zealot most of these people are. Is that they think that the only way to fix climate change is if Canada reduces their emissions by a low single-digit percentage points, which is going to have like 1/10,000th of a percent difference on the Earth as a whole. And the other thing people don't realize too about carbon emissions is that, I mean, the idea that CO2 is the big issue is a complete lie too. Like, again, I've been over that as well. CO2, increasing CO2 is not a bad thing, right? We've been lied to about that for so long, it's not even funny. If you increase CO2, the amount of plants will increase and offset it to a large degree, right? Like, and this is again another one of the worst things about the climate alarmists, is that they're very polarizing as well. If that one of the many things, like the one thing that they could get everyone on board on is planting trees and having more plants. Like, Justin Trudeau pledged to plant, I don't know what like 1 billion trees or whatever the number was. They haven't done any of it. And that's something they could get everyone on board on, right? Or at least no one would criticize it, right? They could probably get people to volunteer to do it too. Like, you wouldn't even have to pay me and have to buy the trees, but that's not that much. Like, spending, I don't know, $100 million on trees is a lot better than taxing a couple $1,000s away from, $1,000 or $2,000 away from the average person for the rest of our lives, right? So yeah, like tree planting is something they could get pretty much everyone on board with, and it would be way less polarizing, but they don't do that. So again, like, now that I pointed out that none of this stuff makes any sense, again, something I brought up a lot before, but I'll bring it up again just briefly, is that what is the real goal of the whole climate change movement then? If the goal isn't actually caring about the climate, or at least that isn't the main goal, what is the main goal? The main goal is socialism, globalism. That is the main goal, and fascism. Like, a lot of people say, well, it's communism. No, it really isn't. Like, um, again, obviously, in a nutshell, communism is the state running pretty much everything. Fascism is the state and corporations basically partnering to run things, and that is what we see in society, right? In Canada and the States, we are headed towards fascism, not necessarily communism. I mean, it is communist in a lot of ways, but it is more fascist in that if you look at a lot of these big, massive corporations, they have every bit as much power as the government does. Like Facebook, Twitter, Google. There's definitely some other ones as well. They have every bit as power as much as the government does, right? Not to mention, I mean, you look at a lot of these billionaires. Look at Bill Gates. You, like he's on the world stage. He's every bit as influential at pushing policy as Joe Biden is. Definitely more than Justin Trudeau is. Right? So the whole goal is a push for fascism, basically. The government wants more power, and the big, rich, greedy. Well, they're greedy, but they're not greedy in the way that the leftist socialists would have you think. They're greedy. They're more greedy, and they want power. Right? The socialists tend to think that all they care about is profit, which isn't actually the case. I mean, they definitely care about profit more than they should, but at the end of the day, they care more about power than they do profit, right? Because again, if all Facebook cared about, if all YouTube cared about was profit, they wouldn't kick conservatives off the platform or censor them for no reason, right? So they clearly care about power every bit as much as they care about profit, right? So, and again, like another reason you know that too is that the vaccine companies have no liability whatsoever. They can damage people all they want, but yet whenever you hear the term greedy corporation for the average person, pharmaceutical companies never enter the conversation, even though they would be the best examples of that, right? So, yeah. But in a nutshell, again, if we were actually worried about climate change, we wouldn't be so worried about Canada and the States. We would be worried about China and India. And until that's the rhetoric around climate change, I'm not going to take anything these people say at face value. Right? I'm not gonna support any of it. I mean, I wouldn't support any of it in the first place, but at least if they were going after China and India, they would at least be honest and actually genuine. But the fact that they're not doing it is just insanity, if you ask me. But anyway, that's what I wanted to bring up today. If you liked the video, make sure you hit that like and subscribe. If you haven't already, make sure you check out those links below. Follow me on those other platforms if you haven't already. If you want to donate, you could do that as well. Again, I would very much appreciate whatever support I can get, but at the very least, just hit that like and subscribe and stay tuned for more.